Clearly, people will be trickling in as needed. Thank you all so much for being here this morning. It's nice to see some familiar faces in the audience. For those of you I've not had a chance to meet, my name is Miriam Post. I am the Assistant Dean for Faculty Affairs and a professor in the Department of Pathology. And not surprisingly, one of the things that I think causes the most stress and certainly the most curiosity in a faculty member's life cycle is the issue of promotion at whatever level it's at. And so hopefully this next hour will help dispel some of that anxiety, some of that fear. And if it doesn't, I say this very genuinely, please do feel free to reach out. I'll give you a couple of ways to do that. And let's get, maybe. Great. Let me just see, does that work now? Yes, it does. Terrific. Okay, so here's an outline. Looks overwhelming. I will try to speak at a reasonable pace. As much as, yes, there's about probably 45 minutes of just me talking, I am completely fine being interrupted. So if you have like a burning question, seriously do just like throw up your hand or even shout out your question, and I will try to leave ample time for questions at the end. So we're going to go through an overview of promotion, what we mean, what we mean by meritorious versus excellent. Sorry, that order got switched a little. Tracks, domains, what you'll need to submit as part of your dossier, and some common myths. Hopefully, you will walk away at the end of this hour knowing which promotion track is best for you, what the timeline is for both preparation and submission of your promotions materials, being able to list the components of a promotion dossier, both those that you as the applicant will be responsible for and those that your department will be responsible for. One of the things I will try to stress is that promotion really is a collaborative effort between a faculty member and their department. And hopefully that's already started and will continue to progress as you move along in your academic career. Ideally, you will be able to debunk at least 2 promotions myths for your colleagues, because you will walk away from this, I hope, with a lot of knowledge that they may or may not have. So let them take advantage of that, and to identify the best places to go for additional information. We start with the question, why get promoted at all? It has a whole bunch of purposes. One is recognition of faculty contributions. It acknowledges faculty achievements in the various domains that are part of our professional lives. It highlights professional growth. It leads, or hopefully, it allows for equitable and transparent evaluation. So the process that we've tried to put in place here at the University of Colorado School of Medicine is to ensure fair and consistent measurement of faculty accomplishments across diverse academic tracks, across diverse departments, using a transparent framework, and the support of academic excellence. So it should foster a culture of continuous improvement, motivating you as faculty to align with institutional goals, maintain high standards for yourself and for your colleagues, and really is meant to be a holistic assessment of your performance, accomplishments, and achievements as a faculty member. A few acronyms that you'll hear me use throughout the talk. Hopefully this will reduce some of the confusion when I do. First, with respect to the faculty tracks, TTE, and my apologies for those to whom any of these mean something else, TTE we use in the sense of the tenured and tenure-eligible track, CP, clinical practice track, RP, research professor track. You'll hear me refer to the PPM, that's the personalized promotions matrix. I will spend some time talking about that. One of the domains that you get evaluated in is research or other scholarly activity, which is a mouthful, and so we've shortened that to ROSA where possible. The DEC is the Departmental Evaluation Committee, and this is a term that is what the School of Medicine uses for your department level review of your dossier. Your individual departments may call it something else. They may call it, hopefully they call it the DEC. More likely they will call it the P&T or PTC or even faculty promotion committee. Like, they may have a bunch of different names for it. So just become familiar with whatever your local departmental practice is. When we say at the School of Medicine level, the FPC, we're talking about the Faculty Promotions Committee, and that's the School of Medicine level review that every applicant for promotion to either associate or full professor and every applicant for tenure must go through that School of Medicine level review. Again, that's to ensure that consistent application of criteria, regardless of what department you're coming from, regardless of what your academic endeavors include. And then VCAC, or Vice Chancellor Advisory Committee, only applies for tenure. And when I talk a little bit more about tenure, you'll learn a little bit more about that. As far as the timeline, as I mentioned, promotion really starts your first day as a faculty member. And it goes through every year. When you fill out your PRISM, the delight of filling out PRISM, but that's maybe a whole separate talk. You have to say, what are my professional goals? What have I accomplished in each of these domains? PRISM was designed to sort of highlight where your accomplishments are aligning with our promotion criteria. Then there's the early career comprehensive review. Many of you in this room have probably already gone through that. You may know it as the midpoint review. It's a name that changed when we got rid of the time clock in certain tracks. Again, more on that later. There's a lot of spoiler alerts here. So this discussion about promotion with your mentors, with your supervisors, really should start early. And if it hasn't yet, which sometimes it hasn't, let this be a wake-up call that this is a great time to engage in that discussion. Even if you're sitting here saying, this is 4, 6, 10 years away, it's still a good time to have those discussions so that you can tailor your track, tailor your yearly activities towards supporting your professional goals, whatever those are. Once you decide it's time to go up for promotion, you'll submit a dossier. We will talk in substantially more detail about the components of that. And that gets submitted to your department sometime between May and September, which sounds a little bit ridiculous to have that much of a variation, but we have some departments with 24 faculty and other departments with 1,500 faculty. And so you can imagine that different people have different needs as far as reviewing their faculty for promotion. Some departments have you submit a dossier and then they give you feedback on it and then you return it to them. Other departments say, give us what you've got, and then they go from there. So again, learning your local department practice is really, really critical. The department will request your referee letters. That is not something you are allowed to do yourself. We'll talk more too. Then once the department has that entire package, the DEC will review that packet. They will write a letter. They vote on both each individual domain and your promotion as a whole. They write a letter, the chair writes a letter, and everything is what we at the School of Medicine consider your promotion dossier. That is due to us in the dean's office, October 31st. The School of Medicine Faculty Promotions Committee, we meet from the very end of September through June because we review about 300 dossiers every year. And so one of the questions we get from faculty a lot is, I submitted something back in May and it's now a year later in May and I haven't heard anything. What gives? And all I can say is we are also human and people volunteer their time on this committee. And we are working as hard as we possibly can to get through these 300 dossiers. We do actually as of this year, notify the applicants within 2 to 3 weeks after their dossier has been reviewed. But in some cases, that won't be until May. It's dependent a little bit on what department you're from, a little bit on who's available to review dossiers, a little bit on when they were submitted, which you don't have control over since it gets sort of out of your hands at a fairly early stage. So all I can say is please be patient. And I promise if you and your department submit a dossier, we will get to it. We're not going to stop doing our work at the FPC until we have gone through every dossier submitted that year. Then, regardless of when the packet is approved, whether it's approved in early October or late June, the promotion takes effect July 1st. And that's promotion. I do want to point out here the difference between promotion and appointment. For those of you who are new to CU, who maybe came in as, say, a visiting associate professor or visiting professor, that visiting title is a placeholder indicating that your academic credentials have not yet been reviewed by the School of Medicine. And so once that happens, the removal of visiting from your title, that takes effect immediately. So a little bit of a difference there between promotion and appointment. Let's dive into the faculty tracks. So the promotion tracks, the reason we have multiple tracks is to recognize the diverse activities, responsibilities, and areas of accomplishment that you all have in your academic careers. Each track has a unique blend of responsibilities, scholarly engagement levels, and promotion metrics. Faculty should select their track in consultation with their mentors, with their supervisors, to match your professional goals, to promote fairness and recognition of your contributions. They are equal in importance. There is not an implied or explicit hierarchy. I cannot stress that enough. That is probably one of the biggest myths at the School of Medicine, that one of these tracks is somehow more prestigious or more valued than the others. That is simply incorrect. Going through them, actually, I will go through them individually, so I'm not going to do too much on this, other than to say the biggest thing to point out here, particularly for those faculty who are employed by affiliate institutions, meaning the VA, Denver Health, and National Jewish, the tenured and tenure eligible track is a misnomer. It used to be known as the regular series. That was problematic. Again, without that hierarchy, it implied that other things were irregular. That really didn't feel good to a whole lot of people. So the name was changed to tenured, tenure eligible track to align with system language. However, tenure is at its heart an employment contract. And so faculty who are not employed by the School of Medicine cannot make an employment contract with the School of Medicine. Therefore, those employed by affiliates are not eligible for tenure. You are 100% welcome to participate in this track. You can promote to professor. You simply cannot be awarded tenure. So let's now do a slightly deeper dive into each of these tracks. Core features of the TTE track. This is what a lot of us think about as that, three-legged stool that so many people hear about during their various training, where faculty engage in some different proportion of teaching, of scholarly activity, and in the case of some faculty, clinical activity, some, although not all, obviously. Everyone has to do service. That is, if you are a faculty member at the University of Colorado School of Medicine, you will do some sort of service in order to get promoted. So promotion expectations in the TTE track are that you have to contribute to every applicable domain in at least a meritorious fashion. You have to be excellent in some things, and what you have to be excellent in depends on what rank you're applying for, but you do need substantive contributions across all applicable domains. One of the things that CU instituted a long time ago was, if you will, the divorcing of tenure from promotion. So you can apply for tenure and promotion at the same time, and that can be at the time of promotion to associate professor or to professor. Tenure is not limited to full professors. Or it can be distinct. So maybe you became a professor 3 years ago and you say, I have now met the criteria for tenure, which are above and beyond that for professor. Then you apply for tenure. There are some departments that encourage their faculty to promote to associate professor, and then some number of years later, then they achieve the award of tenure, then they achieve promotion to professor. So there's no single way to do it. I think those departments are maybe, being a little unfair to their faculty. I probably shouldn't say that out loud, only because it means their faculty need to submit 3 dossiers instead of 2. But again, that is department chair's prerogative, and I do not officially have any opinion about that. We are simply going to say promotion and tenure are distinct. So what are the requirements in the TTE track? There are these 4 domains: teaching, clinical activity, ROSA, and then service. So to become an associate professor, you must be excellent in at least one of those big 3, the big 3 being teaching, clinical activity, and ROSA. Any one of those 3, achieving excellence is sufficient. You must be meritorious in everything else that's applicable. Clearly, if you are a basic science researcher, there is no expectation that you are doing clinical work. That is simply a not applicable part of your application. In contrast, to become a professor, you must demonstrate excellence in ROSA. You must also demonstrate excellence in one additional domain, so either teaching or clinical activity, and then meritorious in the rest. You must also demonstrate a national reputation, and people have a lot of questions about, how do I do that? What does a national reputation actually mean? Well, national reputation, some ways you can evidence that are publications that are widely regarded, widely cited. Service on study sections or editorial boards can do that. Invited presentations or professorships at other institutions can be evidence of a national reputation. Leadership roles on national committees, ways of showing that your impact and acknowledgement of the great things that you've done have extended beyond this institution to the national stage. Diving into the clinical practice track a little. What is it? It's for faculty who focus primarily on direct patient care and program leadership with teaching responsibilities, but no scholarship obligation. Scholarship is absolutely encouraged. It will enhance your promotion, but it's not required. And as I mentioned, folks in the CP track are not eligible for tenure. So the emphasis here is on clinical excellence, clinical practice, leadership in the clinical care environment, meaningful teaching contributions. Advancement is going to emphasize professionalism, impact, and reputation, reflecting usually a very high clinical workload. Those are realities, and that's part of why the scholarship is not required. Here again, I want to debunk one of the common myths, that it's a non-academic track. I sometimes hear people refer to, oh, well, I'm on the academic track. You know what? If you're a faculty member here, you're on an academic track, full stop. The clinical practice track is a serious track. It's for faculty who focus on and excel in clinical care. Performance is objectively measured, and there are high standards for advancement, the same as everywhere else. It recognizes impactful projects that address the quality of care, innovations, community engagement, population health, health policy, health equity. There are a whole variety of ways that you can demonstrate your impact and promote successfully in this academic track that is for dedicated and accomplished clinicians and leaders. It simply doesn't have a scholarship requirement. And so what does that look like in practice? Here, the domains that will be assessed are teaching, clinical activity, and service. So to become an associate professor of clinical practice, you must, not shockingly, be excellent in clinical activity. You must also be at least meritorious in teaching and service, and you must demonstrate a local, i.e. within the school or regional reputation for clinical excellence. I do want to address this asterisk here, which is to say that the title, your formal rank, is Associate Professor of Clinical Practice or Professor of Clinical Practice. That is the rank that must be used in formal official communications, things like a promotions dossier, HR communications, on your CV. However, the shorter working title, i.e. Associate Professor or Professor, can be used in routine communications, like in your email signature, in patient correspondence, in scholarly works. One of the questions we have gotten a number of times is, my patients don't understand what that means when I say I'm a professor of clinical practice. Well, the answer is, they don't need to know. Yes, this is your formal academic rank. At the same time, it recognizes your contributions to promote to the rank of professor. You can and at your discretion should call yourself a professor. You've earned it. To become a professor of clinical practice, you once again must be excellent in clinical activity. You must also again demonstrate at least meritorious achievements in teaching and in service. Now we bump it up a level higher. You must have a national reputation for clinical excellence. And then you must demonstrate at least one of either excellent teaching, that can get you there, or project leadership with demonstrated outcomes. Additionally, you need to show growth since your last promotion. Again, one of the questions we get a lot is this primarily a time-based system or is this an accomplishment-based system? And the answer is unequivocally the latter. There is no time that you either should or must spend as an associate professor before promoting to professor. There is also no time clock associated with associate professor. There are many, many faculty members who say, that is my professional promotions goal, and I am going to hang out as an associate professor until the day I retire. Awesome. We respect that. We want you to be successful in your goals. And more about the time clock later. Lastly, the research professor track. This recognizes our faculty who are really focused exclusively on research-focused advancement. So they focus on grant-funded research, usually have very limited teaching responsibilities. Again, a little bit of service, but usually not a whole lot. They're really, really focused on advancing biomedical knowledge by recognizing intensive research contributions and often innovation. So, not shockingly, This track requires excellence in ROSA and specifically in the scholarship of discovery, which is what we think about as traditional hypothesis-driven research. They also need to be meritorious in service for the associate level. To become a research professor, again, excellence in ROSA, meritorious in service, you're seeing a common theme here, national reputation as a successful researcher. And the wording in the School of Medicine rules, which drives all of this, is skill as an investigator, originality and creativity, and outstanding contributions to research programs. One of the questions that comes up a lot is, what's this time clock thing? And particularly for those of you who have been here for a few years, there's been a lot of ups and downs and discussion around that. This, as of July 2025, only applies to assistant professors in the TTE track. For any of you, which I'm assuming is most, if not all of you, who were hired prior to July of 2025, if you are an assistant professor, you are in the TTE track because that's the only assistant professor rank that existed at the time. So for the moment, you do have this 7-year time clock in place, but my next slide, I'll talk about track switching. So for those assistant professors in the TTE track, review for promotion to associate professor, regardless of track, should occur by the start of the 7th year, but it can happen earlier. We're a criterion-based system. If you've met the criteria for promotion, you are eligible to go up for promotion. It's based on your accomplishments as an assistant professor. So if you've been an instructor for 15 years and you got promoted to assistant professor and you've been an assistant professor for 2 years, you might have trouble promoting to associate professor that quickly, simply because in those 2 years, it's going to be hard to demonstrate sufficient accomplishments. So again, we're not time-based, we're criterion-based. And all faculty, are held to the same standards. Additional criteria, higher standards cannot and are not applied if you do go up early. So that's a little bit about the time clock, and then a little bit about track switching. So why did we get rid of the time clock and therefore add the rank assistant professor of clinical practice and assistant research professor always existed? The reason is faculty feedback. That we did a survey, the faculty spoke loud and clearly and said, this is awful, this is stressful, I simply am overwhelmed with X responsibilities, I cannot possibly get these things together in 7 years, and this is making me want to leave the university. We value all the contributions of all of our faculty, and in response said, okay, good point, this does not work for everyone. The time clock is based on a tenure system. Since faculty in the clinical practice track and in the research professor track are not eligible for tenure, there is no system-wide need for a time clock. So there is now the role, assistant professor of clinical practice, and again, assistant research professor, which are not subject to any time clock. In your role as, let's say, an assistant professor in the TTE track, if your plan is to apply for promotion within the first 7 years, don't switch tracks. There's no reason to, it's just paperwork. You're going to go up in the 7 years, and so it just doesn't matter. If you're sitting as an assistant professor and you're coming up on, say, year 5, year 6, and this is like a horrible, horrible thing, you have 2 options. One is you can apply for a 3-year extension. That's something that's processed through the dean's office and typically is approved, except in very, very rare circumstances. Or you can switch to become an assistant professor in one of the other tracks and take away the time clock. The one caveat there is that once you have spent more than 7 years as an assistant professor, agnostic of track, you are only eligible to promote to associate in one of the non-tenured tracks. So if you are an assistant professor in the TTE track for 3 years and you say, I'm just not interested in associate, your mentor, your supervisor agrees, you switch to assistant professor of clinical practice and you hang out there for 10 years, and then you say, you know what? My life has changed. I do want to promote now. You will only be eligible to promote to an associate professor of clinical practice. And this is just for equity, that for people who are bound by the 7-year time clock, they aren't, so you can't basically jump around, circumvent the time clock, and then come back. is the purpose of that. Once you are an associate professor, I don't want to say there are no rules, but sort of there are no rules. We routinely have associate professors in the TTE track who promote to professor of clinical practice. We have associate professors of clinical practice who promote to professor in the TTE track. That is entirely kosher. If you meet the requirements, you're good to go. And again, there is no time limitation on that rank jump. So here's just a little bit of a summary of everything I just said. And then I want to talk briefly about tenure because that was a question of some folks who did register for this. So as I mentioned before, tenure is distinct from promotion. It's a completely separate review process, and it actually has separate requirements, namely additional requirements. You must be rated excellent in ROSA. You must be rated excellent in teaching. You can be either, well, yes, actually, because we're in the TTE track. So you can be either meritorious or excellent in clinical activity, depending on your personal career. You must include a CV abstract, which is an additional requirement not imposed on everybody else. Your letter writers must be tenured, and they must provide specific justification for awarding you tenure in their letters. You must demonstrate an international reputation. So the bar is higher. There's language that says the presence of this faculty member enhances the reputation of the School of Medicine. These are thought leaders in the field, among the best in their field of scholarly endeavor. These are the people who plan on making permanent contributions to the university and specifically to the scholarly mission of the university. Again, tenure is an employment contract. It means you can't be fired. It unfortunately does not mean your salary can't be lowered, but it does mean you are guaranteed employment. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a multi-level review process. There are additional steps. So once you clear the School of Medicine Faculty Promotions Committee, your dossier then goes on to the VCAC, the Vice Chancellor's Advisory Committee, then to the Vice Chancellor, then to the Board of Regents, then to the President. As you can imagine, that all takes a whole lot of time. So we do encourage faculty applying for tenure to get their applications in earlier, if at all possible, to get through that process in the allotted time. I will note that of greater than 6,000 faculty in the School of Medicine, we have just over 300 who have been awarded tenure. So this is not something that is expected or required. And I do know that basic sciences have a very different perspective on tenure, that in some cases they say, this is critical because if I lose my external funding, I want that employment guarantee. And I am in no way denying that. That is a real stress, particularly in today's funding environment. Yeah, I guess I don't have a whole lot to add to that other than to say, like, yes, we recognize that. Yes, that is a real thing. And sort of let your mentors, let your supervisors work with you to get your application to a place that justifies the award of tenure. All right, so I've been mentioning excellent and meritorious. What does all of that actually mean? How does this play out in reality? The promotion criteria are what drive all of this. These are criteria for promotion that were approved by you. They're written into the School of Medicine rules, which have to be voted on by the faculty. They recognize accomplishments that are either meritorious or excellent in each of the domains. And the purpose of the promotion criteria is to guide review committees. It should reduce subjectivity. It should ensure that promotion reviews are consistent and fair, whether that's across members of an individual department or across faculty in different departments. It reduces reviewer bias about what ought to count. There cannot be a dossier reviewer who says, well, this person's H-index isn't high enough, so they're not eligible for promotion. You know what? H-index is not written into our promotion criteria. That is not a School of Medicine requirement for getting promoted. The criteria recognize and reinforce the values of the School of Medicine, namely impactful teaching and mentoring, team science, co-investigators, middle authorship, are all recognized and able to contribute to excellence in scholarship. Digital scholarship is recognized. If you create a podcast and it's been, listened to 1 million times and it's part of the educational curriculum at 5 medical schools, that counts as excellence in scholarship. Population health, community engagement, leadership, advocacy, all count. Nuts and bolts. What does this really mean? When we say meritorious, we mean work that is praiseworthy, reliable, demonstrating sustained contributions in the various domains. When we talk about excellent performance, this is exceptional achievement that shows innovation, that shows leadership, that shows measurable, demonstrable impact and recognition beyond the institution. People say, well, how do I know if I'm meritorious or excellent? The answer is ultimately it's up to you, with guidance from your mentors, from your supervisors, and based on the criteria. I am not going to read through this. These slides will also be available on the Faculty Affairs website. But I want to point out here in teaching some of the bolded things. You can see in the excellent column, greater than average share, outstanding evaluations, leadership, consistent record. Those are the hallmarks of excellent contributions. Meritorious contributions focus heavily around participation. You're doing the thing. Meritorious teaching evaluations, they don't need to be perfect in order to count, in order to support your promotion. And participation, again, is the word you see again and again with meritorious. Show us that you are doing things. Show us that you are doing them well. That's meritorious. Excellent is you're going above and beyond. And people also ask, well, how can you apply the same criteria to associate professor and professor? How do we know when to go from one to the other? The expectation is that professors have completed more of the criteria and in greater depth. So again, there are no numerical cutoffs. We will never say to you, oh, well, you've done, only 2 excellent criteria, so you're only eligible for this rank. You know what? If one of those excellent criteria is winning a Nobel Prize, I think we're probably going to count that, even if it's independent of everything else. So we are intentionally not a strictly quantitative system. That was done very intentionally to recognize the diverse contributions of our faculty. Similarly, in clinical activity, you can see the same sorts of language: greater than average, recognition for excellence, leadership. And on the meritorious side, participation, a note that you're known on campus or regionally. And again, research and other scholarly activity is going to be the same general themes. I want to make a quick note about this domain, leadership and service, which we wanted to call service, and we're told by the system, no, it is leadership and service. That is what you need to call it, full stop. What we also wanted to do was to say, everyone's going to be meritorious and, everyone's going to be meritorious in service. And they also said, no, that is unacceptable. You can't do that. The reason we wanted to do that is that there is no path to promotion based solely on your service. So from the perspective of, will I get promoted or won't I? It frankly does not matter whether you are meritorious or excellent in service. Is it cool if you're excellent in service? Sure, but it's not going to change the promotion outcome. So what that means is that any significant leadership activities, you want to be documenting those in the domain where they will support your promotion. So if you're leading a clinical service activity, make sure you talk about it as part of the clinical practice area of your dossier, and then just reference it in the service, right? It's a service activity. It counts, but you really want to get sort of where the bang for the buck is, and that's going to be in those 3 major domains. A brief sidebar on scholarship, as I've alluded to before. There's 4 types recognized by the School of Medicine, and they are equally recognized by the School of Medicine in their importance. So discovery is the one, most of us are familiar with. Traditional hypothesis-driven research, team science does count here. Publication is usually the way we think about being able to demonstrate success in this realm. There's also the scholarship of application, and this is a realm of scholarship that builds bridges between theories and practice. So products of the scholarship of application might be things like clinical guidelines, treatment pathways, quality assurance or improvement projects, public development of public policy. Those are all scholarship of application. The scholarship of teaching is development of new courses or teaching methods, doing outcomes assessments on those, developing instructional materials and assessing their impact. So teaching scholarship is not developing a lecture and giving it once. That's not considered scholarship. The impact must leave the classroom is the key here. There must be a tangible product that you can point to and say, here's how this has been adopted beyond my single delivery of, say, a lecture or a lab or an interactive group. And then the scholarship of integration is when faculty interpret, analyze, and synthesize information, that analysis part. So things like review articles, case reports, book chapters, in some cases, artistic products. These are all examples of the scholarship of integration. The key here is that there must be a product, and it must be in a format that can be linked to in your dossier and evaluated. So, getting into the dossier, why do we make you go through this torture? And for reference, I have gone through this torture twice. All I have to say is that what I'm about to tell you, in my opinion, is a distinct improvement over the process I had to go through. Anyway, back to the why. It helps you document your achievements and your impact in a way that can be objectively evaluated by people who have no understanding of what you do. At the deck level, there may be a faculty member in your department who don't understand your job. They still need to be able to look at the criteria, look at your accomplishments, and say, yep, this tracks. At the faculty promotions committee level, that's basically guaranteed to happen, right? Because we have representation from across the school, all the disciplines, all the different roles within the disciplines. They are almost guaranteed not to know the specifics of what you do. So, and we'll get into this, the purpose of your dossier is to provide narrative coherence to tell a story about your accomplishments and how you meet or exceed those promotion criteria. So what is it that you actually are responsible for? 4 components, which again, for those of you who have, say, already promoted to associate professor, probably know is substantially less than what you had to do at the time. And we'll go through each of these. I do want to first point out, this is your best resource. This is the dossier preparation section of the Faculty Affairs website. There's a promotion and tenure button and then dossier preparation. There is a submission button for questions. Feel free to use it. This is one of those things that I hesitate a little bit to say publicly. Anytime you click that, it generates an email to me. So you will get a direct response to me if you click that submit a question button. And particularly if it's a question we start getting multiple times, we'll throw it into the FAQ down at the bottom of the page without identifying who asked it. So the first component, a curriculum vitae, I'm certain you are all familiar with this. It is your complete career profile. It documents everything you've done in your academic career. There's a standard School of Medicine template available, again, on that Faculty Affairs website that you do need to use. And it's the fundamental basis of proving that you've fulfilled the promotion criteria. You should be able to point to things on your CV and say, this meets that criterion. This meets that criterion. I cannot recommend strongly enough that you keep it updated. Don't update it weekly, but update it 2 or 3 times a year. Because if after 3 years, you have to go back and say, wait, when did I give that lecture? Who was the audience for this, invited talk? It's going to be miserable. If call it every 6 months or every 4 months, you're just throwing those things into your CV, it's much, much easier on you. The cover letter is probably the biggest change from the old dossier to the new dossier. And this replaces the narratives that many of you have had to write either for your, what used to be called midpoint is now early career comprehensive review, and for any promotions packets. We do have templates for each of the tracks. We do have guides for each of the sections that are meant to be included. We're developing samples. This right now is we're reviewing dossiers for the first time in this new format. And so it's going to take us a little bit of time to get actual samples up on the site. But between these guides and the templates, there is enough information there for folks to put together these cover letters. Again, it tells your story. It does not regurgitate your CV because it's 3 to 5 pages. What it does instead is it pulls out the most significant accomplishments in each of the domains, and it talks about your impact. It talks about why they matter. It talks about how they advanced your career and what impact they had beyond the institution. So what is this? Oh, actually, we're getting to that. What does it look like in practice? I just want to do a quick, we hear about the PPM, we hear about the promotion criteria. How do they play together? Fundamentally, the way I think about it is one is a Word format and one is an Excel format. So over on the left are the promotion criteria. Over on the right is the PPM, word for word, identical. So if you're reading through the criteria, you say, I meet these 3 criteria, you come over to the PPM, and those 3 criteria are going to be right there. And what you're going to do then is these columns on the right, you'll include the line numbers, or if necessary, the page numbers in your CV, in your cover letter that demonstrate having met that criterion. Once again, examples are in development. This is something we are truly actively working on. I've gotten a lot of questions about the legacy matrix. The legacy matrix is amazing. It provides a ton of examples of activities that can help support each of these criteria. It also got really long and really wordy, and faculty complained mightily because they had to either cut and paste from their CVs or develop entirely new text to explain how they met each of the criteria. The goal in modifying this was to reduce the burden on faculty and, frankly, to make it easier on reviewers so that they could just kind of bounce back and forth and say, oh, you met this criterion with these 10 activities in your CV. Look at the CV. Yep, you did those. Cool. What we have done, particularly, again, for those of you who are used to the legacy matrix, we've mapped them one-to-one. So every item in the legacy matrix tells you which of the promotion criteria in the PPM it tracks to, so that you can easily, again, map those across. So in practice, what does this look like? Here's an example of somebody's PPM. This faculty applicant said, I deserve a meritorious rating in teaching, an excellent rating in clinical activity, an excellent rating in ROSA. And they provided the line numbers in their CV or in their cover letter that support those. They deleted items that don't apply to them. I will note that even though they're meritorious in teaching, there are a couple of things they did in the teaching realm that are excellent. Absolutely include those. If you're excellent in a realm, probably don't include the meritorious because, frankly, they're not going to help you that much. We're going to be looking at the excellent stuff there. And so then we can say, for this participation in teaching or mentoring activities, this individual gave us the line numbers of their CV. Well, here we can go to the CV, see those line numbers, see the activities that meet the criterion. Similarly, they gave us where in their cover letter to find this information. We can go and read that paragraph and say, yep, that checks the box. Lots of questions have come in about supplemental materials. I promise I am almost done, and then we'll open this up for questions. So again, I'm not going to read this whole thing. The basic idea here, a supplemental material is going to support your having met a criterion. Longer is not better. In fact, there's a suggested length of 25 pages, excluding teaching evaluations. Things we really love to see are summaries, synthesis, show maybe if you're in the clinical practice track, show your RVUs over time. What's been the outcome of the 10 QI projects that you've done? Maybe list them and have a little blurb about what the outcome is. The faculty or the students or the trainees that you've mentored, what position are they in now? What projects did you work on together? That's all stuff that can be presented very concisely, very easily evaluated, and we can look at the promotion criteria and look at your supplemental material and say, yes, this tracks. Do not include CME certificates. Do not include letters or cards from patients or families. If you want to say in your cover letter, I received 50 letters of thanks from grateful patients, and here are excerpted quotes, that's amazing. We under no circumstances want to see the actual letters. Nobody ever appropriately redacts the PHI, and it's a major problem. So please do not include those. Increasingly, we're getting the question, can I use AI? Short answer is yes. We're not going to police it. Having said that, note that it does some things very well and some things, particularly anything quantitative, very, very poorly. Every cover letter needs to include the attestation. If AI was used in the preparation, I vouch for the accuracy. And that's done to reduce bias so that a reviewer doesn't look at one dossier and say, oh, well, AI was used here, AI wasn't used there, and value one over the other. That's why blanket statement, if it was used, you are attesting to the accuracy that this is still your work. So in sum, candidate will supply CV, cover letter, PPM, and supplemental materials. Department will supply the other things. This is meant to tell your story. A brief note on referee letters, and I'm sorry, I'm running a little bit long. There are 3 to 6 letters that are required. 3 of those must be external. External means no CU affiliation. The rank should be at least as high as that you're applying for. So if you're applying to be an associate professor, your letters should be from associate professors or professors. If you're applying to be a professor, your letters really should be from professors. If you're applying for tenure, the letters must be from tenured faculty. Internal letters are not regulated. They can basically be from anyone, and that is at departmental discretion, both whether and how many they require. Ultimately, they will be invited by the section head or department chair. You cannot request these letters on your own. You can give faculty a heads up that they may be getting a request, and particularly, hey, this request might go to your junk mail. Maybe keep an eye out. Having said that, what you'll do, you are obligatorily allowed, or required, I guess, to give input as to who you would like to write a letter and who, if anyone, should be excluded from writing a letter because they may have bias against you. That said, the department chooses who to actually ask. So if you give them 10 names and you say to all of these 10 people, you're going to be getting a request, probably all 10 people aren't going to be getting a request. So just kind of keep in mind that the department is the one who ultimately solicits these. CU system rules say that they need to be arm's length. Do not ask do not even write down your mentors or former trainees, close research collaborators, friends from residency. A referee is not a recommendation. A referee is an objective evaluation of your accomplishments and your qualification. So they can look at, say, your CV, look at the promotion criteria and say, yes, this person has done the things in order to get promotion. This is tough if you're a locally practicing, say, clinically oriented physician or other provider. Leverage your mentors. Your mentors have broader networks. They can say, oh yeah, I have a friend over here who would be willing to write a letter for you. That's part of the responsibility of a mentor, and particularly for those of you who are mentors. Think about how to do that for your mentees. You can certainly ask your division head, other supervisors, do they know of anyone? If you serve on any sort of a committee, that's a great place to get letters. That's not a close collaborator. That's somebody who's worked with you for a couple of years, maybe for 10 years, but you see each other twice a year. So it's also, in a sense, a drive to get involved beyond the institution to where you then have this network to request from. So key takeaways: understand the criteria, know what track you're in, know the criteria for that track. Make sure you are documenting your achievements. As I said, keep your CV updated, not obsessively, but regularly. And if you've done something particularly impactful in, say, year 2 as a faculty member, write a quick blurb about it. Save it in a file somewhere. It will save you hours and hours of time later from having to try and remember what you did 10 years ago, say, in some cases for associate professors. So keep things like that updated. Just, 3 or 4 sentences. I did this. I gave this amazing lecture. 20 people attended. The evaluations were fabulous. That's done. You don't have to go back and try and remember it later. Engage with your mentors and make a plan. Hopefully I've addressed most of these already. You do not need excellence in everything. There are specific criteria, and you do not need to meet every criteria in the excellent column to be rated as excellent. Again, impact matters more than quantity. Only RO1s or first author papers count as scholarship. Hard no. I hope I've made that abundantly clear. That external referees should know you well? No. They should, in fact, ideally should not know you well. And that if you apply early, there's a higher bar. There is not a higher bar. It is a criterion-based system. So thank you so much for your attention. We have about 10 minutes left for questions, and please, please do evaluate this session. I'm going to be giving it to various audiences. I really would love to make it better. So please tell me how that can happen, and I'm happy to open it up for questions. And again, you're in post, you can choose email. Do feel free to shoot me an email if you're just a person, or you can always make questions that reading page. Yes.
The referee letters. So you're saying they have to be from someone of equivalent rank or appropriate rank. Does that mean that they have to be faculty at another university?
Great question. So for those who will be later listening online, the question was about faculty letters. Do they need to be from other academicians? The answer is they should. So there is a provision in the system requirements that say somebody with specialized expertise or knowledge can sort of substitute that specialized expertise or knowledge for rank, or in some cases even academic. So most people, it's going to be from other academicians. There are rare exceptions.
I'm thinking in particular of if you interact a lot, they need people in government.
Yes.
Or in not-for-profit organizations.
Right. And the question was like government, not-for-profit organizations. Yes, I would still say of the three, probably two should be from other academics because fundamentally this is an academic promotion. But yeah, if one of your letters is from somebody at like the biggest nonprofit who says this person's work impacted the lives of 500 children and, you know, pulls them out of horrible situations, that's impactful, that matters. Yes.
If we state that we use AI, does that affect in any way the revision of the dossier? I mean, that's so new for us, and it really will help a lot to use it, to be honest. So
very reasonable question. So again, about AI, if you use it, is it going to impact the review of it in any way? The answer should be no. This is why we're requiring just across the board everyone. If AI was used, you would test the validity. That way, people who are using it include that statement. People who are not using it include that statement. And we as review committees and also full disclosure, I don't vote on any review committee anywhere, so I am truly outside of that process. I just do the processes of it. So yeah, that way review committees, they don't know if you used it or not. Again, though, you do need to edit it. I've talked to a bunch of people who said, oh my God, this made my cover letter 100 times better. Take it or leave it, my recommendation, and play around with this. Feed it something tangible and have it make it better. If you just dump in like your CV and say write a cover letter, it's possible, you know, dump in your CV, dump in the promotion criteria, say how do my accomplishments meet these criteria. You'll get something useful that's going to require a lot of work. If you have at least the outlines of the letter to start with and then say like buff this up in these ways, that's really where AI excels and save you money. Yeah.
Do referee letters need to be from other schools of medicine if they're academics, or can they go from other types of schools?
Right. Do referee letters need to be from schools of medicine? Not necessarily. No. They need to be able to attest to whether you've met the criteria. And yeah, particularly for those in basic sciences research, whether you're in the basic science or clinical department, these sort of national colleagues doing similar sort of work may not schools of medicine. So that's yes.
I have a question regarding the clock. During COVID, there was this extension business with the clock, but my understanding at that time was it was optional to opt in for more years or whatever because of COVID and stop drama with the administration.
Yeah.
But someone senior told me, yes, there was an opt-in, but I think universally they just gave everyone the extension even if you didn't want it. And I said, well, I didn't want it. She said, no, I think everyone got it. So what did you, yes,
I
to
think
whatever
the question was about the COVID extension to time clock and was literally problematic, what the heck does it all mean? The answer is, I honestly don't remember if it was opt-in or not. I can tell you that it was a lot before. So everyone who was an assistant professor in, I believe, 2020 was granted a 2-year extension. So the Office for Faculty Affairs does track your due date as an assistant professor, and that's something that we let departments know at the end of each year and which assistant professors are coming up on their due dates. So that 2-year extension is built in to your due date. And for anybody hired after the time of COVID, you do not have a 2-year extension, although once again, a 3-year extension is possible. There's form online. You do have to get your department chair to sign off. the Office of Faculty Affairs has to sign off on it, those executive vice chancellor are like, don't do it because you're like, well, I'm just not ready, that's probably not gonna fly. But like, I have these extenuating circumstances, do that.
Yes.
With regard to the clock and calendar, so promotion takes effect July 1,
Yes.
but you talk about within the year, within a 7th year. What if you were, like, your start date was January 1? When does the year start?
Yeah, the question is about the clock, and for people who don't start during the summer, who start say mid-year, and when does their clock take effect? I will confess I'm not conversant on specific details. If you wanna reach out with an actual question, I can look up the information and find it out. Because right, the start of your 7th year is going to be, say, a January date. We're telling you you need to submit your dossier, you know, let's call it May through September. Can that be in your 7th year instead of prior to your 7th year? My suspicion is probably. I will tell you the review committees don't necessarily look like, the review committees are not, they're not trying to police this. They want to see that you've met the criteria you're applying for. So talk to your department, they to some extent have a final say. Feel free to contact Faculty Affairs, we can give you some guidance. But to some extent, don't worry about it too much. I know that's like ridiculous advice and everybody worries about it, but to whatever extent. Any other questions? Yes?
Is there if you go up for, like, say, a promotion to professor of clinical practice, is there a way to track switching, right? To later than switch or be promoted to the senior track?
Absolutely. So the question was about if you get promoted, say, to professor of clinical practice, is there a way to, at a later date, if your career goals change, switch tracks to become, say, a professor in the TTE track? The answer is yes. You will need to, depending on how many years it's been, you will need to submit different components of your dossier. And you will need to demonstrate that you've met the criteria for the track you're applying for. So particularly in the instance you just gave of switching from professor to professor TTE, you're gonna need to demonstrate evidence and research. You have a national reputation anyway, so that, because that's how you got professor in clinical practice. So really, it's just saying, yes, I have that scholarship piece that I was not obligated to do before. But usually we will require additional letters of recommendation. It's kind of like a mini dossier, you don't need your CV, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not the full-on promotion track, the full-on promotion package, and there is no going back. Let's just say that you want to go from professor of clinical practice to professor of TTE and be in the department where the FPC says, we don't really think you need this. You stay professor of clinical practice. You will never be bumped back in any sort of way.
So then, yeah, is there any implications for going up for promotion at, like, the professor level and not you?
Right, are there any implications going up for promotion and not getting it? Not that I know of. There is an implication for going up for tenure and not getting it, which is that if you go up for tenure and you're denied by the FPC, you cannot reapply for 3 years. But for straight up promotion, there is not consequence. Yes.
I have a question related to your comment about R1s.
Yes.
So my division had told me that I need to have an R1 in hand, or at least a very fundable score to go up for promotion from assistant to associate. And that was based on past experience that they've had with PhD faculty. However, NIH is a mess, of course, right now. And so could you maybe speak to how the School of Medicine is changing their opinions based on R1s?
Sure. The question was, what do I do if my division or department is telling me I have to have an R1 and NIH's knowledge to be what it is, and how does the School of Medicine play into that? Oh, the answer is it's complicated. We are not going to override a department requirement. I will note that technically, department support is not an absolute requirement. for applying for promotion, if you say, my department is wrong, there's bias, etc., you can submit the dossier without departmental support, but it'll still include a letter from your chair, who presumably will be talking about why they don't support. Now, if the FPC can evaluate that, I think that happens once every 10 years type of situation. As far as the requirement of an R01, I mean, I think you could legitimately go to your department chair or section head and say, this is not a requirement in the criteria. We were told that if we meet the criteria, we should be eligible for promotion. Here are all the ways I meet the criteria that have nothing to do with an R01. I would hope that that would be sufficient, and that's a place where they still give you pushback. Maybe that's when you reach out personally, and say, could we have a mediated talk about this? Could, you know.
Yeah, so I should clarify, the division that's saying it's a requirement, they're saying that they've had trouble getting faculty in the past promoted without it. Not a department requirement, it's more of a school of medicine hangout.
The questions of the school of medicine practice.
Yeah.
Not from what I've seen,
Not
I
lately.
mean, not at all, but particularly not assistant professors. In my experience on the faculty promotions committee, I do not know of any situation I've seen yet where the department is saying, well, this person doesn't have an R1, therefore we're not. It really is looking at the some body of evidence. And yeah, there's a question there.
Yeah, I'm primarily in a teaching and administrative role, so the scholarship piece is the most challenging from just a time bandwidth standpoint. Your experience with other peer-reviewed dissemination, like posters at national conferences, platform presentations, even peer-reviewed education sessions that have been presented, does that carry any weight, or it really?
So the question is, if you're primarily teaching administration, scholarship can be a real challenge, and kind of what counts. And the short answer is yes. Dissemination counts, and if you're presenting to a national audience via poster or platform, that absolutely counts, particularly if you think about it. Many conferences, certainly not all, will have as like a supplement to their main journal, a place where your poster is included, so that then is literally a publication of the poster. If you're presenting to a national audience and you've got an evaluation about your presentation, that is evidence of a national reputation. If you are invited to give talks on educational topics at other institutions, that's not scholarship per se, but it certainly is evidence of your national reputation. Really any sort of dissemination. And if you've created a curriculum and you say the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology picked up this element of my curriculum and incorporated it onto their website as part of their study for boards, that's scholarship dissemination. So curricular disbursement, if you will, can absolutely count. Yeah.
Along the same lines as the question previously, my section head and I are trying to decide whether to go up or not. And really the only non-excellent part of the what would be my dossier is the funding piece. And that's largely because of the situation right now. So I'm just wondering, are there going to be, or is there talk about kind of lightening the emphasis on that, given that it seems impossible? Like perfect scores are not getting funded.
Yeah, and again, the question again was about external funding for various sorts of research, and is the discussion at the school level of teachers students. There isn't specific discussion of it because that's not the sole or necessarily even primary driver for promotion. And tenure is a little bit different. I absolutely have heard in tenure cases, well, this person really hasn't demonstrated that they've got consistent funding, and that is acknowledged to be a problem. From the perspective of promotion, there are so many other criteria, so many other ways of demonstrating having met those criteria, that funding as an isolated factor shouldn't really be that fair, I would hope.
Okay, then I have one other question, that's okay. So this is for associate to full, and, so do they have to get new letters, or can they just refer to the old letters if you do for the tenure?
So the question is, if you're going from associate to full and then later go for tenure, do you need new letters? The answer is gonna be yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and anytime you apply, certainly anytime you apply for tenure, you will absolutely need new and current letters because they must specifically address your qualifications for tenure. They must be from tenured faculty members. The people writing your letters actually have to submit a CV or a bio sketch on their own, so yeah, it's required.
Okay.
I mean, they can potentially be from the same people. They're just gonna need to be new letters.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Is that like the key matrix map to the new one on the website in this particular spot? I just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, the question is whether the legacy to new matrix mapping is on the website. The answer is yes. I believe it's about 2/3 of the way down one of the drop-down menus, and it says like, I think it even says legacy matrix mapped criteria.
Thanks.
So that is there. Anything else? Thank you so much for being here. Please do the learning session. You're also gonna get an email with chance to it. Thank you so much. And good luck.
Thank you.